Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I am Chris Franks. This is a talk that I put together with Derek Deroche. So if we have time, Derek might jump on at the end and share some of his tips. But this was a collaboration effort, even though I will be doing most of the talking today. Well, it's really difficult to talk about design in 25 minutes. And so we start with a Google slide here, getting started with design, but realizing that people spend their whole careers, right? They go to school for this. It's really difficult, especially for a science audience, to pick up enough to be really competent designers in just a short amount of time. So Derek and I sort of strategized by looking at some of the other talks that were being given today. We tried to fit what we thought was a different approach, and we approach design as a process and a strategy to help you to get started. So that'll be kind of the flow of things today. It was really great to see, again, I attended the whole first symposium, and I got to see John and Phil, and then also Alex talk about using different tools, about developing a message throughout the process. Phil and John talked about probabilistic messaging and messaging strategy with the test beds. And so as you're choosing images or maps and then working on your message through the forecast funnel, going from the outlook to the event, you're making design choices, right? You're crafting messages with maps. You're crafting messages that have hierarchy with photos. So all along the way, we are working with design, and it's really good to get some of the basics down. So that's what we'll cover today. We're going to talk about design as a process, and then we'll kind of give some of our own personal tips. I wasn't lying about Googling. Again, Derek and I aren't professional graphic designers. We just happen to, through the course of our careers, work with it a lot. And it's really difficult for the folks that are really busy issuing warnings, crafting forecast messages, involved in science day in, day out, to really become true experts at graphic design. But there are no shortage of training blogs, training videos, links, books that are free, and really you can really get started. So I really would start with Google. The images on the right were just the top Google searches, and I took screen grabs of them. And there's a lot of getting started with graphic design for beginners, 10 graphic design best practices, 10 best tools and tips for getting started with design. So that's a good place to start. I could call the presentation done, but we actually have a little bit more here. If you do that Google search and you go click on those links and go to these articles or go to these videos, you'll get a lot of stuff like this. And I'm gonna give a shout out to Kenny in Des Moines. He's worked a lot with design and design training. So Kenny has a 50 slide PowerPoint deck that goes over all these sort of design principles, the basics of design. But if you go to these links, you will also get things like balance and hierarchy, working with negative, or sometimes called white space. So you will learn that you're going to put your image needs to be weighted. So if you got a photo on the right, you need to sort of balance the text with an image on the left. Or sometimes you can use asymmetry to make a point. You can use hierarchy, so bold text with supporting details that's not bold, to let the reader work down the page, maybe from top to bottom and left to right. I know we're a little bit uncomfortable in this agency with a negative space or white space, but it's really a great thing, and designers use it to let the reader or the viewer relax their eyes and move from subject to subject or topic to topic with ease. And we're a lot better in the agency. When we first started creating presentations and using FXC, or even in the early days of PowerPoint design, there was immense pressure to fill everything on a slide or everything on a page with as much content as we could muster up. We're better at that. We decided that that's not the effective way, and we're creating multiple images if we have multiple messages. You will also get stuff that talks about typography. So you're going to talk about, they're going to talk about how to choose appropriate fonts, to use professional fonts in professional settings, right? Comic Sans is great on a 7th grade birthday invitation, probably not great if you're talking about high-end severe weather or tornadoes. They're going to talk about color. They're going to talk about how you can use accent colors to bring about contrast, to match colors on a page, match color in the text, maybe matches a color in the map to really drive home and connect messaging elements on a slide. You're going to get items about repetition, alignment, and proximity. Those are concepts that we use a lot, especially in our templates, which I'm going to talk about here in a sec, that we may not even know we're using. We're going to group items together that have similar sort of meaning, right? We're going to use proximity in that case. We're going to repeat a pattern. That's the essence of a template or the essence of a style guide. We're going to use common footers and headers, so folks know exactly where to go when they want to read the title of a slide, and they know exactly what they're getting into. So again, Google it. There's a lot of great information out there, but we're not going to spend the entire presentation talking about the design basics. Again, I mentioned we're going to talk a little bit more about strategy in the process and how to get started. Even if you were to memorize all the design principles and you took a lot of training modules and work through videos, right? It takes a lot of practice to get good at some of these principles. For example, I will never be Bryce Harper, but I could probably get better at baseball if I spent a lot of time and practiced. So that's really what it takes. Here's sort of, I think, is where we've sort of changed our paradigm as an agency. When we first got started creating graphics, we sat down a lot of times with a blank slide or a blank sheet of paper, right? And we started from scratch, which is a very difficult place to start, even for designers. So when it comes to design and creating graphical elements, or even you could take this and extrapolate to video, you either got to spend a lot of time or you use a template, which is a great, it's a great tool. Templates are great. Designers use templates. If you're a designer for Apple or Nike or some national brand, there's design attributes that you already have set aside. If they want to feature 3 products, they have a graphic template and they just plug in the products and they use their brand identity to kind of get the message out. A note about the spending a lot of time. So let's start with the image on the upper left. That is a NASA project where this year, that was their poster for Earth Day. NASA spent so much time on this and brought in so many people that they actually created a video about creating this poster. So they've scripted out a video, they interviewed the people that were involved. Tremendous design, right? There's an Earth in the beehive there. There's all kinds of little Easter eggs in the graphic. It's well lit, it's professional photoshopped image. Took a lot of time to create that. Planet or Plastic, the Nat Geo cover, award-winning cover, just didn't happen. That was probably a small design team or an accomplished designer that spent a lot of time working on that perfect image. So that brings us to our point about templates. They're great because they take a lot of the guesswork out of the design process, right? This image right here took a lot of work to create. It looks simple, but sometimes the simplest images and templates take a lot of work. So common footer and header, that's where we established the Weather Service and NOAA brand, right? This uses balance, text on the left, image on the right, easy for the reader to kind of shift focus back and forth. The use of hierarchy in this case, obviously the title at the top, but we have hierarchy in our bullets there, right? We bold a key message and then we have supporting details if readers want to go into the more detail. Readers will work down the page, so the bullets probably become a little less important as the top line message. But if you are in the space where you have some time, or in some cases a lot of time to work on design, and so this is not the the in between the AFD and TAF where you're rushing to get something out and you have some time, there is some strategy out there. And this was taken from an introduction to design thinking, a process guide. This is a 5-step process from this book, Design Thinking. There are other similar sources out there that'll kind of give you, they may call it a slight, maybe a few more steps or a few less steps, but it's roughly the same. But Derek and I both found this very similar to how we sort of approach complex design problems. We thought it'd be good to share here. So again, thinking about design as a process, this is really more if you have time, blue sky day, and you have to sit down and create something. Maybe it's a presentation for an IWT. Maybe it's a poster that you want to use for some outreach, or a poster for a conference or something even. So the first step is empathize, understand the problem. So this is really, you really have to understand your audience, know the audience. You have to really understand what the message you're trying to convey. What are the challenges? Maybe not just technical challenges or design challenges, but maybe societal. So this is a multi sort of dimensional empathize, right? Understand the problem, truly understand it. Step 2 is where we sort of write that down. We're going to analyze what we did in step 1. We're going to interpret the problem, and we're going to plan it out. So even if you're doing something that's a presentation or a graphic, an illustration or a flyer, it's great to put the concept into writing. My most effective designs start with a written outline, either provided by my own thoughts or given to me by somebody that wants me to work on a design. But creating an outline, establishing key messages that you write down. Sometimes those messages that you write down actually appear on the poster or flyer, right? The text element actually makes it into the design. But it's great to put that in writing. It's absolutely essential for especially complex design problems. I guess step 3 and 4 is really where the idea and prototype phase. It's kind of the fun part of the design process, where we do some research, imagine, and then we apply creativity to try to solve the problem that we laid out and defined in steps 1 and 2. A lot of times, I think we sort of just jump right to 3 or 4. We got a blank slide. I'm making this PowerPoint. I'm making this graphic. I'm going to go right into just starting to draw stuff on a screen and write with text. And if you skip steps 1 and 2, believe me, steps 3 and 4 become a lot more cumbersome and a lot more difficult. So after we have our prototype, we test, right? This is sometimes as lengthy, depending on who you're working with or who's involved, as the process of creation in itself, the review and the revision, but still very important for things like ease of understanding, maybe 508 compliance. So we're really concerned about contrast. Is it legible? If it's an illustration and it's some sort of flow chart or something, does it make sense? Not just to a fellow meteorologist, but does it make sense to the target audience? A great time to probably bring in non-meteorological staff if it's an outreach and education graphic or presentation, right? If your target audience is the public, maybe the ET in your office or the ASA or your kids or your spouse or significant other, whatever. It's the test, the revision and review stage is obviously an important part of the graphic design process, or just design process in general. So here we have 3 images for Lollapalooza. So again, kind of going back to step 1 of knowing your audience and what is the message. These are all Lollapalooza graphics, but with obviously the message and probably even the audience is much different. So the Lollapalooza poster, I think this was from a couple years back, definitely trying to convey something quite a bit different than the NWS Chicago event support package. The top image actually has some nuance and different, perhaps even a different audience, right? There's a colored matrix, looks a little bit more like it might be designed for an EM or some sort of advanced user, whereas the bottom right image, what, where, when, recommended actions, definitely has the feeling of more of a public graphic, right? Severe thunderstorm potential late tonight. So Chicago, obviously, using the audience and putting that first to kind of craft these graphics. And it looks like templates as well. So we'll go ahead and offer a couple tips, and I think we should have time to get to Derek. I kind of sped through a couple things here this time around. First and foremost, seek to find inspiration and ideas, and I got a couple examples of that here in a couple slides. You know, it's really hard to be creative, and even when you're trying to develop a template, to start from scratch. So even the best designers and the best artists, they seek inspiration and ideas from the world around them. Maybe other designers, maybe it's just what they see in nature or what they see in culture. Think about what applications you will use. I got a slide on that. And then don't be afraid to try new things and never throw things away. And what I mean by that is, there's a couple points here. You know, when it comes, especially in the I have a lot of time to try something phase, it's okay to try some new things, right? It's okay to play around with some colors, to some different shapes. Again, especially if you find an idea online or on Twitter or something, you're like, man, I wish I could try to recreate that, but maybe make it weather focused. But I also say that don't be afraid to try new things, but then it's okay to bail on something if it's not working. I can't tell you how many times I go down a road and I try to design something and I'm like, God, this is just not working. It does not look good. So I bail on it, but I never throw it away because it may work for a future use. So I have a lot of work files, and I do dust them off quite a bit. You know, I might have been playing with a map of some sort and some sort of labeling technique, and then it just doesn't work for the task at hand. Or maybe if I'm doing it for someone, they don't like it, but it might work for a project down the road. So I always kind of hang on to those things. This kind of goes back to my first point about ideas and inspiration. If you are really serious about design and getting more involved in visual communication, visual messaging, then you better have an idea folder. I think mine is several hundred images, and it's from all over. I got images that I inspired from professional designers. Here's a chalkboard image that I kind of liked. It's not all weather related. I pull inspiration from companies, from designers, from academia, from everywhere. And I realize that I don't have the technical skill or capabilities to execute some of these graphics, but I use them for inspiration, and a lot of times I actually do try to create from what I see. Here's just a few more images, actually from government agencies. So there's a NASA image, a NASA poster, which was actually, I know this was a contract with an artist. Iowa DOT has some great sort of infographics, so I know I have several images in my idea folder. Here's a FEMA Star Wars themed preparedness robot with flashlight extremities, batteries, and food and water on the front of his chest, and a weather radio head. So yeah, find inspiration from multiple sources. What application will you use? So we primarily at the field offices design out of PowerPoint. But if you need more collaboration and it's a presentation that needs several people involved, PowerPoint gets sort of difficult. So you can design in Google Slides, obviously. You can design in Google Forms. You can design in Google Sites. So pay attention to the application and think about the application you'll use. I have Python up there, right? Because if you're in a data visualization, think about the code platform you want to design in. Those images in the box of images in the lower right-hand corner is Adobe Creative Cloud, a whole suite of design applications from pretty advanced video effects to video editing, document editing. You can do illustrations in Illustrator. There's Photoshop. We do have a NOAA enterprise license that it's kind of pricey, but people can buy in and get an individual license. But there are free software, and I appreciate the question on the last call that these are approved by NOAA. So GIMP and Inkscape. GIMP is kind of a multi-purpose photo editing kind of design tool, and then Inkscape really does a lot what Adobe Illustrator does, where you can draw very similar in some ways to PowerPoint, where you can layer things in, you can draw, you can do illustrations. So think about the application that you need that'll kind of meet the design challenge. We all borrow ideas. So this goes back again to the inspiration piece. The image on the far left is flood warning, flood watch. It was a collaborated FEMA and Weather Service graphic. FEMA did the design. So FEMA's design team, and they actually do have professional designers, kind of worked up this like two-tone image with the flood warning on the left and the flood watch on the right, and the messaging was collaborated with the Weather Service. Well, when I was with the communications office, we wanted to expand this to other products, and we also wanted to expand some of the messaging, the take action and be prepared, and we wanted to color match the Wawa map. So we made some tweaks, but I was inspired by the FEMA designer. So I liked the two-tone image, and I did the same. I wanted a little bit more of a dramatic image, not just the raindrops in a puddle. So I created submerged cars, since we are talking about flood warnings. And then also you see on the right, CAL FIRE, inspired by a Weather Service, and NOAA Graphics sort of recreated it on their own. So again, we all sort of borrow from one another, and that's just fine. Obviously, no copyright infringements, but it's okay to take design ideas. Here's another example of, again, because of my idea folder, where I had been collecting a lot of these quotes and photos, and how to feature NOAA employees and Weather Service employees on social media or on websites. So I had a huge collection of the images that look like that you see on the left. There's one from Adobe, there's one from Cisco Live. And when it came to a NOAA project, I dusted off some of those images and tried to recreate and put a Earth Systems and Weather Service spin on it, with a background and then kind of a photo in the front. So inspired by the work of other, probably professional designers. And then finally, I think before I toss it over to Derek, well, we had to create a suite of social media materials for the GFS upgrade. So I had this, watching Iron Man, had this idea of his Iron Man suit with all these things pointing out the features. I also have an image of a football stadium facility upgrade that kind of had this technical architectural sort of theme, and I try to wrap that into the GFS upgrade. So again, because of studying design and collecting ideas in a folder, I tried to recreate it. And then in the actual, these effects were much more dramatic. But again, in the review and revision process, it was told we need to tone this down a little bit. So it kind of became more of a background feature rather than a prominent feature. Derek, that's all I have. I'll go ahead and maybe pause and let you take it over here for a few minutes.
All right, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to the great material Chris has presented already. I'll just share some brief tips from my end. The first one being keep it simple. We've heard some great talks throughout the symposium, and I think they tie directly into this idea. When we talk about graphic design, a lot of times we're really focused in on kind of a subtopic of graphic design, which is communication design, where you're taking the ideas of graphic design and crafting a message around those concepts, and trying to tie in your message to the overall design process. And that's not an easy thing to do. There are entire degrees and specialties dedicated to this entire discipline. People go to school for many years to do this exact same thing. So don't get frustrated. It's not an easy thing to do. So the second thing is, kind of work in small teams. It's a lot easier to be agile and get the development process going if you're working in a smaller group. The keyboard found on the iPhone was developed by a team of 3 people at Apple. Just because you're a small group doesn't mean you can't do some great things. So keep it small, work in small teams, and you can continue to iterate on those things. And then that ties into the last thing there is to exactly what I said, iterate the process. Keep building upon what you're doing. So while I have a couple of minutes here, we'll run through a couple of agency designs that we've been working on over the last several years. So Chris, if you want to go to the next slide. And you're all probably familiar with these graphics, but these are the Twitter warning graphics. And, this is actually the first iteration of those that we rolled out many years ago. So you can see we kind of started out with quite a different vision for how these were going to operate, but through the iteration process and the design process, we got feedback on things that worked and didn't work and things that maybe we should change. We worked with social scientists to develop and get feedback from partners and the public and how people are interpreting these images, and we ultimately landed on where we're at now. The next slide of the current version for these graphics, which is again quite a bit different from what we started with. So this kind of concept goes into a lot of the things we do in the design world, but it's important to just kind of keep building, and we continue to get feedback on these types of things and make those iterations to hopefully land at a better design in the end. So with that, I'll wrap up and we can take any questions if we have a couple minutes.